You're listening to Coaching Skills for Leaders. This is episode 20, airing on January 9th, 2012.
Produced by Innovate Learning, maximizing human potential.
Welcome to Coaching Skills for Leaders. My name is Dave Stachowiak. This is the show for leaders who want to develop their coaching skills so they can help others achieve their maximum potential. Whether you're a seasoned leader or you're leading people for the first time, improving your coaching skills will drive your success and, most importantly, the success of others. This week's topic is your core values. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Coaching Skills for Leaders. I'm coming to you from our studio here in Orange County, California, and so excited to be with you here today for the beginning of another week and the continuation of our series on personal leadership. You'll remember from last week's episode, number 19, that I am hosting an entire month this month on personal leadership and the importance of us as leaders and as coaches of being able to lead ourselves first before we try to lead and coach others. And it's a good time of the year to be thinking about that because it's a natural time for us to be thinking about that anyway here at the beginning of the year. And so we're going to be jumping in today into a topic that's tremendously important for personal leadership, which is your core values. But before I jump in there, if you haven't had a chance already to go back and listen to episode 19, last week's episode, where I set up the importance of personal leadership, you may want to jump back and take a listen to that. And you can find that on iTunes, or you can find that on our website at innovatelearning.com. Just search for episode 19 and you will find that there. You know, when I think of core values, I think back to my experience when I was trying to find my first job. I was a student, an undergraduate student at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, back in my home state of Illinois. And it was my senior year of college, and I was in the business school. And I was on my, I think, 6th or 7th official major at that point. I did finish in 4 years, amazingly, but I was one of those folks that kept trying different things throughout my college career. And I kept going. I started off in the engineering school. I was in the liberal arts school and ended up graduating in the business school. And I wanted to try everything. I was fascinated with all kinds of different things and really wanted to find the right niche for me, and probably would have changed a few more times if I had had more time in college. But I ended up at the end of school in the business school. And so, senior year came along and I needed to find a job and figure out what I was going to start doing with my career. And I remember going to some of the career fairs that were on campus back then, and going and talking to the recruiters. And I ended up interviewing with a bank, one of the biggest at the time. It was one of the biggest banks in the Chicago area, and had a really good experience with going up and talking with them. And I remember I interviewed in Chicago with them, and ended up going back for, I think, a couple of series of interviews, and went to a nice lunch with their company. And it was an opportunity to begin a management development program with their bank. And it started off with, being a kind of a personal banker in one of their locations in Chicago. But the hope was that as you did well in that role, that you'd transition into getting into bank management and leadership, and eventually really progressing and being very well supported in a large organization. And all indications were that would happen. As I met people in the bank, and I saw the people who had been 3 or 4 years ahead of me, and you met them and talked with them, that it was really a wonderful organization to go work with, and that they would do a lot to support me in my career development. And indeed, the interview went really well. I got an offer. I remember I lived in the dorms at the University of Illinois all 4 years. And I remember being in my dorm room and getting a package from them after they had offered me the job. And it had all these great things in it. It had, cookies and gifts. And it was, one of those kind of come join us. We want to have you sort of a thing. And I just couldn't get excited about the job. It was the right, everything about the job was kind of like the correct thing to do. It was the right move from, having a business administration degree. It was in Chicago. It was nearby, where I grew up. It was a great organization. Everything was perfect, except I just couldn't get excited about it. And I remember thinking about it for a few days, and I just didn't have a passion to go work in banking. And it's not that there's anything wrong with banking. Banking is a wonderful industry to be in, and then there's wonderful things that that industry brings. And I value the relationships we have with the people in the banking industry in our lives and who advise us. And I think it's a great thing to do in the world. I just couldn't get excited about it. And after a few days, I decided, if I wasn't excited about it now, I certainly wasn't going to be excited about it 6 months in, a year in, 3 years in, 5 years in. And so I ultimately told them no. And it seemed like kind of an odd choice to make at the time, but it really connected with what I realize now were my values. And one of the values that I hold very close is meaning, investing my time and talent into things and people that personally inspire me in the world. And I didn't have that opportunity at the bank. And I didn't know that that was one of my values at the time, but boy, that's something that I just didn't have there and I knew wasn't the right fit for me. And instead, I ended up going to work for a company. At one of the other career fairs, I ran into a guy who was wearing a polo shirt. All the other recruiters out there at this business fair were wearing suits and ties, and of course, all the students were in suits and ties. And I ran into this guy wearing a polo shirt at a table. He had a bright yellow mat on front of this table, and he said, "Hey, we're running education centers for kids all over the country, and we're looking for great college graduates who've got good business skills, who are willing to get hired, go move somewhere, work with kids, run a team, do marketing, do some really cool things in the world, and learn all aspects of business." And boy, that sounded really exciting to me. And it wasn't the best move financially, because I didn't make anywhere nearly as much money as I would if I had gone to work for the bank. And I took that job and I moved to California, and boy, did they push me. That job scared me every day I went there, because I was doing marketing, I was doing management, I was doing sales and sales training. I was working with parents. I was working with kids 8 hours a day. It scared me every day. There was always something. I was getting tough feedback. It was a company of tough feedback, but it was awesome. I learned so much, and I loved it because it had meaning for me. I was investing my time into talent and things that inspired me in the world. And so I think probably if you look back in your career and the things that have been important to you, you think and you look at how values have shaped the decisions you've made. And I know they've shaped my decisions. And values are something that, as leaders, we absolutely have to have clarity on for ourselves. We have to know what's important to us first, because if we don't, we're not going to be able to lead others. So I'm hopeful that today's show will give you some opportunity to start thinking about this. If you've already thought about this and you've done some work around thinking about what your core values are, I'm hopeful that today's show will provide a good reminder and maybe even a little check-in on revisiting this and recognizing the importance of it. And if you have never done any thinking about this, then I hope that today's show will give you the opportunity to start thinking about it. And I'm going to provide for you several resources at the end of the show today that will guide you toward that. As you're listening and you have questions about values and what I'm talking about today, though, by all means, feel free to call or send me an email with feedback, and I will be sure to respond to you personally or on a future show. And you can reach me at 877-LEARN45. That's our feedback hotline. Again, 877-LEARN45. Or you can email me directly at feedback@innovatelearning.com. Again, that's feedback@innovatelearning.com. Last week, I had mentioned one of the books that I think is a tremendous book on leadership that I continually refer back to, and my copy's highlighted and dog-eared a whole bunch, is a book called The Leadership Challenge by Kouzes and Posner. It's in its 4th edition. It's a bright yellow book. And I know some of you, actually a couple of people have reached out to me and mentioned that they are either have read this book or are going to be reading this book as a result of me mentioning it last week. And of course, one of the things that this book talks about is the importance of values. And I'll tell you, probably if you'd talked to me about values 10, 11, 12 years ago, I would have said, oh, that's kind of fluffy, foo-foo, kind of, personal type stuff, kind of touchy-feely type stuff. And I've really grown to recognize the importance of having clarity about values. And one of the things that I really like about this book, and I mentioned in last week's episode, is that these two authors have done a tremendous amount of research around leaders and leadership, but not just celebrity leadership. They've really looked at the everyday leader. And here's what they have to say about values when they look at leaders that they admire and people that they've studied, that they say, and I quote here from page 46 of their book, "Among these most admired leaders, one quality stands out above all else. The most striking similarity we've found, and surely it's evident to you, is that the list is populated by people with strong beliefs about matters of principle. They all have, or had, unwavering commitment to a clear set of values. They all are or were passionate about their causes. The lesson from this simple exercise is unmistakable. People admire most those who believe strongly in something and who are willing to stand up for their beliefs. If anyone is ever to become a leader whom others would willingly follow, one certain prerequisite is that they must be someone of principle." And I would add to that they must have clarity about what their values are, and then a willingness to communicate those values and to stand up for those values. And so, I think one of the best ways to understand what values are and how they work is to give you some examples. And so rather than just to tell you more about values theoretically, what I'm going to do today is just walk you through some of my values and what things that I found that I value, and going through exercises over the years and continually refining my values list. And I did this a couple of days ago again, and I found that there are some things that I look at a little differently than I did, the last time I did this exercise. But my values have stayed, I think, pretty centrally focused on in the last few years. And, there's all kinds of advice out there of how many values should you have, what order should they be in. I think that's kind of a personal decision. That's up to you. But for me, I like the number 5. 5 for me is good. I think anything more than 5, if you're looking at your core values, starts to become too many. And I say that because if you are having 10 or 15 or 20 core values, those aren't really core anymore. If you believe in anything, ultimately you believe in nothing. So I think it's important to have probably 5 or less core values, things that you really hold dear. And so I'm going to give you an example and walk you through just 5 that are important to me. And you may have 5, you may have 3, you may have 4. But I'm hopeful that my example of the things that are important to me and why they're important to me, and some examples of how I apply them in my life and my career, might get you thinking about your values. And then I'm going to walk you through some steps you can do to think of what your core values might be. So my 5 are my 5. Yours may be similar. They may be very different. These aren't right or wrong. They're just the ones that work for me. So know that this is a very personal process and a personal exercise that you'll go through if you're considering what your core values are. So the first one, and these are in no particular order. I know there are folks out there that say, you have to have your values and you have to have value number 1, value number 2. I just like having 5. The 5 for me are kind of the 5 key ones that I think of and that drive my decisions on a daily basis. I don't necessarily have them in order, but if that works for you, by all means, go for it. But here's the first one on my list, in no particular order, and that's the one I just mentioned a few minutes ago. That's meaning. Meaning for me means investing my time and talent into things and people that personally inspire me in the world. And I am really happy to say that I have had great success in doing this throughout my life and throughout my career. Have I been perfect all the time? No. But it has driven my decisions about just about everything I've done and everything I've gotten involved with, certainly over the last 10 to 15 years. And it started with that first job out of college, of starting to think of what's the thing that's really going to drive me. And I made that decision on that first job, not by how much money I was going to make, although certainly I was concerned about that, but I was more concerned about what is going to drive me to get up in the morning and get out of bed and really enjoy what I do, and where I can see the connection between what I do and how it impacts people's lives in a positive way. And I got to do that every day for 3 years in that job. I get to see how the work I would do would help children to learn more effectively, would help parents to become better parents, would help schools to serve kids better. And it was a phenomenal experience. It really tied to my heartstrings, because every time I walked into that business, I knew that I was doing something that really connected me, that had great meaning. And I still try to do that today. In fact, one of the organizations I'm involved with, I'm going to be going to a board meeting later on today, is an organization called the Global Center for Women and Justice, which is housed at Vanguard University here in Costa Mesa, California. And one of my wife and I have a dear friend named Sandy Morgan. Sandy is the director of the Global Center for Women and Justice here at Vanguard University, and I'll probably have her as a guest on the show here sometime, because I think she's just a tremendous leader in so many ways. She has been running this organization for the last few years on Vanguard's campus, and she has a tremendous passion for women and women's issues in the world, and being able to help women progress and to not be victims, and to be people that are just as valued and as respected and as empowered in the world as men are. And of course, we've made great progress on that here in the United States. There are many places in the world where that kind of progress has not been made yet. And so she in particular has a tremendous passion for ending human trafficking. That's an issue she feels very strongly about. And she asked me to be on her board about a year ago, and I said yes, because for a couple of reasons. One is I care about the issues that her organization advocates for, but I'm also tremendously inspired by her. The work she does in the world to reach out to women, to empower women, to try to end human trafficking, which is a horrible, horrible practice in our world. Those of you who aren't familiar with, I'll give you some resources to learn about it. But and to the point where actually I've worked with her over the last almost year, and we have a podcast that is on iTunes called Ending Human Trafficking that I help her produce. But what drives that for me is meaning. I care about that issue. I care about her. She inspires me. Her organization inspires me. And so I want to be a part of it. I want to be a part of her doing positive good in the world. And so that value of meaning for me drives a lot of decisions I make. So that's an example of how our core values can really drive that decision. And that's something that people who work with me and who are led by me know that if I'm going to feel passionately about something and it doesn't have, if something doesn't have meaning for me, I'm not going to put a lot of energy into it. That's just kind of who I am. I want something that really has meaning behind it. Another value that I hold dear is sustainability. This isn't one that would have been on my list 5 or 6 years ago, but in sustainability, I don't necessarily mean that from an environmental standpoint, although certainly I feel strongly about that as well. But it's putting my effort into things that will provide lasting, positive change in the world. I really believe strongly in that. In fact, I was talking with a colleague a couple of weeks ago about doing client events, and we were talking about a recent event that we had worked on together, and he said, I can tell you don't have as much passion for kind of the one-day workshops or seminars. You have a passion for more the long-term relationships with organizations and with clients. And I said, absolutely. I have a much harder time getting excited about kind of one time or one day or, just very short periods of time that we work with someone. And certainly, there's a little bit of a financial, connection there too. Obviously, our organization benefits more from, having longer term relationships. But even more so than that, I've just found over the years of being in training and education and coaching now for, almost 15 years in this industry, I want to really develop relationships with people where they're going to make lasting positive change in the world. And I don't believe that happens on a one-time thing. I don't believe in quick fixes. I just don't get passionate about that because I don't see that it really results in sustainable change. So I really get excited about working with organizations and clients over a longer period of time because I see what an amazing difference is. The organizations and clients we've worked with, where we've developed programs where we've worked with them for 4 or 5 or 6 months versus working with someone for a day. It's night and day, the difference. And that really excites me because I want to put my effort into things that are going to provide lasting change in the world. I don't want to put my effort into things that are going to be fleeting. I'm hoping that the things that I do really do make a tremendous change in people's lives, and I believe I can do that if we do things in a sustainable way. I also believe really strongly in vision. And we're going to talk about vision in a future episode here this month. Actually, the episode that'll air on January 23rd, we're going to talk about personal vision. So I'm not going to spend as much time talking about this one, but I really have a passion for creating the future by building things twice. And by building things twice, I mean, everything's built twice. First, it's envisioned, and then it's created in person or in real life. And boy, I see those things that come in the mail once in a while. We get mailings about going to conferences. And I just saw one recently that said someone had the title of being a futurist. A futurist is one of those folks who kind of gets paid for thinking and researching what things are going to look like in the future. Boy, I would love to do that. That would be a cool job to have, to be able to make a living doing that. I think that'd be a lot of fun. I love to plan things out. I love to envision what things are going to look like in the future. I have more fun planning something than I do doing it. I even, like to vision out what's a weekend going to look like? What's a vacation going to look like? That's a tremendous passion for me. So vision is something that's really important to me. That's part of my core values, as is empowerment. Empowerment's one of my key ones. I want to give others the confidence to learn, grow, and contribute to the world in sustainable ways. In fact, that's one of the reasons that I've hosted this show, is I want to really empower people who are engaged listeners to this show to do things that will help them to learn and to grow and to contribute to the world. And as an example of that, one of the things, I think any of us who do shows on the internet and this, like whether you're listening to us a podcast or on the web or on iTunes, there's a way that we can track how many people have downloaded or listened that week. And I started kind of watching that when I first started doing the show. And, recently I realized, I'm not that concerned about how many people listen to the show each week. I mean, I certainly would love to have a lot of people listen each week. And some weeks, a lot of people listen, some weeks, less people. But what I'm really concerned about, and my goal in 2012 actually, is not a goal for how many people listen to the show each week. That's of much less concern to me, as is how many people are engaged listening to the show. So I actually have a goal this year of engaging more people. And what do I count as engaged? Well, people I hear from, people who email me, people who I have conversations with, people who call us, who listen to the show, and telling us about the difference that we're making in their lives. And I'm grateful that many of you have reached out to us. And my goal this year in 2012 is that we'd have 100 people around the world that were what I would put in the category of very engaged people with the show, people that I'm not only having a conversation with, but that people are having conversations with each other, and that we have online forums and things set up to do that. And there's lots of different, technological things that we need to set up to make all that happen. But I'm really concerned about that, of really engaging people and people being empowered. And so that's one of my key values too. And then I think the final one for me is love. My passion and desire to treat people like fellow human beings. I was talking with one of the listeners to this show about one of the recent comments that he had sent in about, why don't managers do a better job of caring about people or treating people well. And I think part of it is just, we just forget to love people. And so I really try to find something that I can love about each person that I run into in the world. One of my teachers and mentors, I heard speak several years ago, and he said, anytime I run into a difficult person, I just try to find something about them that I can love. And that's something that really resonates with me. And one of the best ways I love people is I genuinely listen to people. People feel heard around me. And that's the way that I show love, one of the key ways. And love for me is, a key part of who I am. I think when you love people, that you treat them well and you lead them well. So those are my 5: meaning, sustainability, vision, empowerment, and love. And some of those are different than they were 5 years ago, but, they're all similar to the things. Some of my vocabulary has changed. Some of the words have changed, but those core values haven't really changed. Those are part of who I am. And the more I learn about myself and the more I work with people and the more I grow myself, the more clarity I get around those values. So you don't have to have it all perfectly figured out when you sit down and figure out what your values are. You can start, and you can always adapt and change things later. I've had an ongoing exercise with myself over the last 10 years of changing and tweaking these values. But if you start, you'll get 80% there. Just sitting down and doing some figuring out, what are your core values? And if you've never done that, here's some suggestions for how to do that. So first of all is to write out, what is your perfect day? If you could create a day where you would do all the things you wanted to do, what would that day look like? So I would challenge you to sit down, grab a piece of paper, or grab your favorite computer program and open it up and type out or write out, if you could design the perfect day, what would be the things you do? What kind of work would you do? Where would you go? Who would you have lunch with? Where would you be? What type of interactions would you have with people? What would be the perfect day? What type of volunteer work would you do? And if you're able to capture what that perfect day looks like for you, I think that you will find that in that perfect day, you will see some clues as to what your core values are. Another question to ask yourself is, what do you do when you're losing time? What do I mean by that? You know that sometimes you get in that flow, that zone where you're so excited about doing something that you completely lose track of time, where like 3 hours went by and you're like, wow, where did all the time go? I was having so much fun doing that. That's something called flow. And actually, there's a book by Nihai Csikszentmihalyi called Flow that I've been meaning to read for a while, and it's on my list this year to read. But when do you get in those situations? What are times that you just lose track of time? Those are the times that you're probably connected with something you love to do and it is aligned with your core values. How about this? What events are you most proud of in your life? For me, it's my relationship with my wife, how we love and empower each other. And so that connects me to some of the values that are important to me, love and empowerment. What events are you most proud of in your life? What relationships are you most proud of? Those will provide clues for your core values. When do you feel most alive? When do you feel most alive? When you find the answer to that question, that will provide resources and clues on what your core values are too. And also on the other end too, what makes you angry? For me, people I run into have no compassion for others at all, or tear others down, or just self-righteous all the time. That makes me angry. and that's because it violates some of my core values of empowering others and love and meaning. And so if you find things that really make you angry, those are clues to what your core values are. And then finally, what are you willing to fight for? What things would you be willing to fight for if you saw? For me, if I saw someone treated poorly, or if I saw a leader treating someone poorly in the workplace, and when I have saw that, that's something I'm willing to fight for. That's something I'm willing to say something about. And so what are you willing to fight for? What things, if you're willing to fight for, What clues does that provide to you to your core values? And so if you ask yourself those questions, by the way, all these questions I'm going to put up on the show notes here for episode number 20 on our website. So that's at innovatelearning.com. And by the way, one more resource for you. You want to check this out. One of the things that's helpful for many people of figuring out their values is kind of figuring out, what are all the different kinds of values out there, and kind of starting to go through some of the more commonly held values. And so what I am doing is I am putting up on our website a list of just some common values that many people hold when we do exercises like this. And I will say this up front, this is not an exhaustive list. It's not to say that if there's something that's not on this list that it can't be a core value. Not the case at all. This is just a starting point. It's a list of a whole bunch of different values. It's just to start getting you thinking. So what I challenge you to do is you can download this list. And to do that, just go to innovatelearning.com/values. So again, that's innovatelearning.com/values. You'll download a PDF, and it will be a page with all the different values on there. And here's the process to go through. Start with circling 9 of them. Circle 9 that you like, that really kind of resonate with you. And then once you've found 9, do that first. Then eliminate 2. See if you can get down to 7. Eliminate the 2 that aren't essential to you. And then once you get down to 7, then do it again. Eliminate 2. Get down to 5. And those might be the 5 that you really like. And I'd encourage you, if you can, even limit it down further than that. You might get down to 3 or 4 that are kind of your essential ones. Get as far as you can until you can't eliminate any more, until you say, I just can't cross that one off the list. And I think you'll end up somewhere between maybe 2 and 5 core values. And that, in addition to the questions I've already mentioned here, I think will provide some good tools and resources for you in starting to consider what your core values are. And so this is, as you get clarity around that, that's going to help you to have real clear perspective on how to lead yourself well, and is going to roll right into our upcoming conversations in the next 3 weeks of this series on strengths and blind spots and helping us to identify those. That we're going to talk about next week on January 16th. I'm going to be welcoming a dear friend and colleague, Susan Gerke, who's one of our senior facilitators here at Innovate Learning, and she's going to be walking us through some perspective on some blind spots we can look at in our communication styles. On January 23rd, we're going to be talking about creating your personal vision, and January 30th, your 2012 action plan. And just a reminder too, in February, we're going to be talking about engagement and how to engage people in leadership. So again, as I mentioned last week, what do you want to hear around those topics? What questions do you still have around values? And what do you want to know about strengths and blind spots and creating your vision and your action plan? Send me an email or give me a call. You can email me at feedback@innovatelearning.com, or you can call 877-LEARN-45, and you can leave a message there and reach out to me, and I will respond to your comment on a future show. And just a reminder, the link for the show notes is on our website, innovatelearning.com, and search for episode number 20. And a reminder that values list is on the website too. So if you think that might be helpful to you and helping you clarify your core values, go to innovatelearning.com/values. And you will find a resource there that'll help you to get clarity on your values. Hey, if you or your organization would like to improve the coaching skills of your leaders, let us know. We might be able to help. You can reach us at 877-LEARN-45. In the meantime, have a great week. I look forward to talking with you and Susan Gerke next week on strengths and blind spots. Have a great week, everybody.